All right. Thank you so much, Aaliyah, and thanks to the African Studies program for allowing us to do this panel through the wonderful Africa at Noon series. It's such an exciting group of people and scholars, and I'm glad to be able to be a part of it. Today, we have two really amazing panelists, both based on the African continent. We have Ejiro Umukoro, based in Nigeria, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a minute. And also we have another panelist, Fredrick Mugira, who is currently experiencing a few technical difficulties. So our goal is that he will be joining us shortly, and we'll start by hearing the really fantastic stories that Ejiro, who also goes by Lady E, has to tell us. Before I sort of turn things over to our first panelist for today, I want to take one quick moment to tell you a little bit about the program that is allowing these journalists to join us today. And that if we were not living in these times and having to operate virtually so often, would have been able to bring these journalists to us in person here in Madison. This is the Campus Consortium partnership that we are, as a university, engaging in with the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting. And many of you are probably familiar with this center, which provides funding for longer form, deeper journalism stories, most especially focused on human rights issues, on war and conflict, but also on the amazing things that are happening all around the world. The focus is also, of course, on funding journalists based outside the global north and on telling stories that don't often get told in the sort of mainstream, legacy media, perhaps here in the United States, where the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting is also based. So this Campus Consortium is a network of partnerships with the Pulitzer Center and universities across the nation, across the US. And the goal is to connect international reporting, to connect journalists across the world, as I mentioned, and also for those of you watching right now who are students, to fund student journalists to do this kind of deeper international reporting as well. So we will be having an information meeting at the very beginning of next semester, of course, virtually, with the Pulitzer Center. And that meeting is all about the Student International Reporting Fellowship. This will be our second year doing that fellowship. Please, please, please apply. I will have more information for you on that very soon. So let me look now and see if our next panelist has joined us, Fredrick Mugira. Very excited to see both, and now I can see you, Ejiro, awesome. And so let me tell you a little bit about our panelists really quickly, both of whom have been fellows, not student fellows, but professional fellows with the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. First of all, Fredrick, who's joining us now, is a Ugandan water and climate change journalist who has won multiple awards. He's also a National Geographic storytelling explorer, a media trainer, and development communications specialist with over 10 years of wide-ranging experience. And he's reported on numerous continents, but his focus has been on the journalism of the Nile River Basin. He is the head of the Water Journalists Africa Network, which is a network of over 700 journalists in 50 African countries who report on water and all the many things related to that vital resource. So his work with the Pulitzer Center actually covered COVID-19 in the Nile River Basin. And then, as I mentioned, we also have Ejiro Umukoro, who is popularly known in the media and social media as Lady E. She's a media executive with Mega FM 89 in Nigeria, an investigative journalist, and the writer of a book called Distortions, which I think she'll be talking a little bit about for us today. And her work with the Pulitzer Center covered gender and sexual-based violence, as well as violence against children during the COVID-19 lockdowns, a really, really crucial topic. Both of these, such different topics and so fascinating. So I'd like, actually, if we can, for each of you to speak for a few minutes, just kind of filling us in as an audience on this work that you did with the Pulitzer Center. And if I can maybe ask Ejiro to speak with us first, tell us about this Pulitzer-funded work that you did on sexual and gender-based violence during the COVID-19 lockdowns. Fill us in. And right now, I actually can't hear you. I'm wondering, are you muted? Let's see. So I still can't hear you. I'm not sure. Can anyone else hear Ejiro? Looks like you're not muted. Okay, it looks like others also can't hear. Oh, I'm so sorry we can't hear you. I'm wondering if maybe what we should do is have Fredrick speak first, and perhaps you could speak via WhatsApp with Diana and see if we could find an alternative. We can see you, which is wonderful. Just can't hear you. So Fredrick, are you there? Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, there you are. All right. Well, why don't we start with you? And if you could just kick us off by telling us a little bit about this research you did with the Pulitzer Center on COVID-19 in the Nile Basin. We'd love to hear about it.
Certainly, yes. First, I would like to say I'm sorry I can't turn on the video. It's 9 p.m. in Uganda here now. The internet is being used by several. If I put on the video, probably the line will be cut off. I actually had problems joining. So my name is Fredrick Mugira. I've been a water journalist for about 15 years now. I am based in Uganda. I do several things. I'm a news editor with the leading media house in Uganda called Vision Group. Apart from that, I founded a network of about 700 journalists in Africa who report on water and sanitation. It's called Water Journalists Africa. We founded this in 2011. Then later in 2016, we founded another project under Water Journalists Africa called InfoNile. Now, InfoNile is a group of about 400 cross-border geojournalists with a mission to uncover critical stories on water issues in the 11 countries of the Nile Basin. So we do this through data-based multimedia storytelling. As I told you, InfoNile is a project of Water Journalists Africa. So what we do at InfoNile, we publish original collaborative investigative geojournalism projects on undercover issues of water and environment in the region. As I told you, this region is actually big. It has 11 countries, that's where the River Nile starts from Uganda and then ends in Egypt. So there are about 11 countries in this region. So we are about 400 journalists, working in this region under InfoNile. So under InfoNile, we provide story grants to journalists to conduct data-based water journalism projects. As I told you, we do cross-border journalism, and then this journalism is focused mainly on the Nile Basin. It's just one river, so we just want to work towards the conservation of this river, and that's what we do. So we also at InfoNile, we also mentor and train journalists in data journalism and science communication. We also create interactive maps and data visualizations on key issues of water, environment, and climate change. So this is the background now of what we do at InfoNile. And so now I just want to take you through what we did with reporting. We had a project. We've been working on a project for the last 6 months that was funded by Pulitzer and partly by the National Geographic Society. So we reported the dual dangers of COVID-19 pandemic and water crisis in the Nile. So what we did, we sent out, when we got funding, we sent out a call for applications from journalists in the region. Mainly, as I told you, we are about 400 journalists. Mainly, some of these are part of our partner media organizations in the region. So we sent out a call for applications, and journalists applied for these grants. As you can see now, we got this grant from 2 funders, 2 donors. So we wanted to give it out to journalists to work on stories. We wanted them to focus on COVID and water shortage in their communities, and how COVID is affecting their communities, and especially water scarce, the communities that are facing the problem of water scarcity. So we selected out 37 journalists 37 journalists that we gave journalism grants. Now, this journalism grant was not too much, not to the American standards. We were giving out about $500 to journalists. Yes. And yeah, as you will see later, we were pairing journalists. We paired journalists, the rural-based journalist working with the radio station and an urban-based journalist working with the TV or print. So wanted to have a feel of what was happening in the rural areas, in rural communities, and also in the urban communities. And we specifically wanted the journalists in rural communities to report for radio. So we gave these grants to pairs, a pair of journalists in rural area and then also in urban area. So later, we linked these journalists, after giving them journalism grants, we linked them with our partner who have data mentors. This is Code for Africa. We've been working with Code for Africa for several years now. So they have data wranglers, and then we wanted our grantees to work with data mentors to visualize their stories. Like I told you, we do geojournalism, so we make sure that we visualize. We use local data. So we want journalists who work on these stories to have this data and then visualize it. So we linked them with the Code for Africa data wranglers who visualized their data. Just to say on this, it was not just pairing them with the data mentors. These data mentors trained them. We also had about 6 months now of training. These journalists were working with the data mentors. Every Friday would have a session. Then after after 2 weeks, we'll have a bigger session of all the grantees. Then the first week, they would be working together with their mentors. So later we produced 37 stories with data visualizations. Now, when I talk of data visualizations, this is what they produced with their mentors from Code for Africa. Yeah, so these stories were produced by the rural-based journalists and the urban-based journalists. So we had a radio story and a print or probably a TV story. So, and then these stories were published in their media houses, in their local
Fredrick, I think we may have lost your audio. Did you mute yourself? Oh no. Can anyone else hear Fredrick?
I can't, Lindsay, but I do think we might have Ejiro on the line on WhatsApp through Diana.
Okay, and Fredrick, I'm so sorry to cut you off in the middle of a really fascinating discussion, and I have so many questions for you. So once we sort of get your audio figured out, we'll come back and I'd love to hear more about this massive collaboration. And it looks like he's probably logged off and is about to get back on now. So we have Ejiro through WhatsApp with Diana. And if you would, I'd love for you now to tell us a little bit of background on this story that you did with the Pulitzer Center on crisis reporting, or this series of stories, which if I'm understanding correctly, it looks like ran in The Guardian, which is a great place to place those. So tell us a little bit about those stories that you did.
Okay, thanks again, Lindsay. The network today, they're all celebrating us in a very big way, if you know what I mean. They are dancing, they don't want us to dance, but I mean, somehow we navigate our way. So it's good to connect with you. Unfortunately, I can't do video, but let's get to the heart of the discourse. Thank you for inviting me to the Wisconsin University Pulitzer Center collaboration with Code for Africa to make all of this a success story that we're talking about. Now, I remember you asked me earlier on talking about why I did what I did. You've already done the introduction, so let's save as much time as I can with that. I'm not going into that for now. So I started my story on COVID-19 because I live in an environment where I realized that most of the time, a lot of things go untalked about. There's not enough trigger or provocation that inspires the kind of action we need to implement things. So I decided to take on sexual gender-based violence stories, particularly during the lockdown, simply because it became a very pervasive issue. And what I realized was that the COVID-19 itself made me, as a journalist, to understand that our job is about saving life and saving the lives of people and creating impact. And the moment I began to understand that, I had to start asking myself questions: why I do what I do, how I can do it better, and how can I create impact. But most importantly, how can I empower the audiences, young, old, small, and big, to take ownership of their knowledge power, to take actions that will protect them or help them fight monsters, both in human forms and in abstract. Now, I would have loved to show you pictures of the stories that made me, that inspired the reason for my pursuing gender-based violence stories. I hope you can all hear me, though, so that I don't keep talking for and thinking everyone is listening to me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I hope others too can hear me very distinctly too. Okay. So I realized that if I share some of the pictures with you, unless you're not human, you're not going to respond to that. So I kept seeing pictures of molested children, abused children in every form you can think of, from emotional abuse, psychological abuse, cultural abuse, socialization abuse, if you will. I also kept seeing emotional abuse taking place, and I was seeing violent human rights abuse being done every day, and people just looked away. And when I say looked away, I mean people were so disconnected, distraught, in such a manner that what people were doing was, we just say, it happened, it's an exclamation, and then followed by, all of those repetitive shouts and cries, this is bad, and then you know what, people move on to the next story. And so we do not see the kind of reaction that creates government action to have the political will to do something right, so that they can begin to look at this issue and address them properly. And then we began to see a situation where it was beginning to be normalized. And the reality I uncovered during my investigation showed me so many shocking data that I just couldn't keep quiet about it. I had to write them. And then it became clear to me that part of the reason why sexual gender-based violence was so predominant, and the only thing that COVID-19 did was to amplify to the surface, straight into our eyes. People who used to be unconcerned about this thing, uninterested about stuff like this, all felt, oh, it's not happening to me, it's not close home. They began to question what is happening within their home. And so when I began to write my first story, when it came out, people said, are you serious? This happened? And then I began to use data with great support from Code for Africa. I need to give them kudos for that, because they helped me with the data visualization. All I did was go get the data, and I really worked so hard to get those data, because getting data in Nigeria is like squeezing water out of stone. It is difficult, and that's because there's no culture of data gathering, data referencing, data retrieval system, data archive, and all of that. That should be the culture. So I saw a situation where institutions and NGOs, civil society, you ask them questions. Okay, you keep saying you're fronting this, you stand for this, you say this has to stop. And then when you ask them for data from hospitals, from ministries of women affairs and child development, and from ministries that are in charge of orphanages, children's homes, remand homes, you don't get that data. It was shocking to me that why aren't I getting data? Why is it hidden? Now that compelled me, like there's something more that don't meet the eye. And that meant that if we're going to address an issue, we have to understand what is the problem, and data is what reveals what the problem is. The moment you can get your data, it directs your attention, one, in a very specific manner to what the core problem is. In other words, you begin to look at that data to interpret where problems may be coming from. And then what I began to realize was this following: that we live in a highly sexualized world where sex addiction is pervasive, instant gratification education, damning consequence is the norm, I can get away with it, and nothing will happen, the de facto response, and then a sense of entitlement that people have with regard to satisfying their personal needs at the expense of somebody else's health, and somebody else's mental health, somebody else's own protection, somebody else's human rights that are abused. And then I began to see a correlation between the increase of rape and the nonchalance of media. That's to say that was true. I noticed that the concept of rape, when I began to, when I had the chance to interview rapists in prisons, some in remand homes that I get to know, because what I wanted to do was, I didn't want my story to be so singular or stereotypical. So what I did was, I told myself, if I'm going to create impact with this story, it's going to be about storytelling. I had to accept that first, because I didn't want it to just be dry data that somebody looks at them, swipes to the next page and say, I'm done with that. I want it to get to the core of people so that people would react. So in doing that, I said, I need to get all the stakeholders involved. And when I say stakeholders, every facet, every level, every individual, every group, every story, every angle to the story that has to be gotten, from the victims to the perpetrators to those who are trying to protect, to those who are in charge of the law to protect persons, to see that their human rights abuses are not abused. And then what I discovered in talking with many of the perpetrators was that rape is seen as a tool of punishment. It means for personal machismo that empowers them and enables them, to manifest these 6 types of rapists. People don't know that there are 6 types of rapists. This is what my story uncovered. I didn't know there were different kinds of rapists in that category. And when I say different kinds, we're not saying these people have mental problems. We're saying that they have also come to wire or be wired to think the way they do. Now, in understanding that this is the root cause of it, it helped me tell my story in a way that it is impactful. We begin to understand that we are dealing with people. Why we ask the question, why is this on the increase, is because, one, we're dealing with people who think in this manner. Either they have been socialized that way, been raised that way, the culture allowed them to perpetuate it, religion empowers them. These are the many factors beneath the scenes, as it were, that enable them to be as they are. And below that too is another mental thinking, a mental mindset, which is what inspired me to write the book I have called Distortion. Now, when I went further to interview these young people, for them to say that many of them didn't know, the young persons I'm talking about are between the ages of 14 and 17. And they are saying that, no, actually from 11 years, if I go back to the first original data, 11 years to 17, they said raping, they didn't see it as bad, neither did they even consider it a criminal offense. They saw it as a tool for punishment, as a tool for showing I'm a man. It's a masculine definition of how to subdue and make a woman concede and agree that a man is superior to them. That gave me a shudder. And to understand that the fact that even media advocacy is also not there has enabled many of them to think that the society condones it. Because the media, as we know, is the conscience of the masses. If it does not exist, then watchdog fails. In other words, if media are designed, for example, what we have today in Nigeria, where what people do with the media is they just want to do as little as they can in terms of content. So people just go for the music category of media where you spend less. And it's understandable because doing business in Nigeria with the media industry is a killing task. I mean, I am in an executive position, so I can tell how serious the situation is. So what people just do, a business owner will do who has investment, will say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to run a lean radio station, a lean media outfit, so that I will not take up the deeper journalistic work that is required. Because investigative journalism is a lot of money. It's a lot of human resources. It's a lot of sacrifice, time-consuming, emotionally draining, mentally staffing. Now, for you to be able to do that, you have to have the core manpower who are designed and created and supported in many ways to be able to do this. Then you also have to have the financial backing so that you start a project and you finish it to the end. But when I went further in this investigation, I began to realize that the lack of media consistency in creating media advocacy, where you create a situation people understand their media rights in the sense that the media enables them with the laws, the knowledge tool, the knowledge power that enables them, empowers them to also fight off perpetrators, it's a problem. When people don't know where to get information, they become dull. And that is what the music has done in Nigeria industry. In fact, what I see is that we have an opiate audiences doused by the media opium of just music, where people now feel that they are disconnected from the reality. So listening to music all the time gives them it's like an opium of constant music, which gives them the illusion of escapism from reality. So that what we have created in the last 3-4 generations is a generation that is disconnected, ambivalent. They don't care, and all they want is do the selfie thing. You will see an incident where a child is raped or where there is an abuse going on, and you just see everything go viral, and it ends there. But you don't see people take action and think, you know what, we have to find the right NGOs to do this job or the police to do this job. And then talking about the institutions that are supposed to protect, what I now understood was that the reason why these things are pervasive is that we have an institutional problem, a systemic failure in the institution where law, order, respect for it is not there. And the reason is this: rape has become a business. It is even a business model as I speak. I did not know it existed until I did this investigation. And to see a situation where parents sometimes want their children to be raped in lieu of money and silence, that shocked me to my bones.
Yeah.
They will claim poverty is the reason, or lack of job opportunities as the reason why they enable perpetrators to continue to be on the loose. But at the heart of it is a total disregard for the life of a child. The voice of a child is not recognized in our environment. A child does not speak. And a situation where the human right of a human is not also respected, as we have seen in the #EndSARS that became such a big deal in Nigeria, and as we continue to see regarding other issues that many young people are beginning to play up and say, you know what, we've had enough of our human rights abuses. There's this sudden wokeness in amongst Nigerian people that, look, we actually have what is called regard for human life. Prior to now, that wasn't as evident as it should have been in the mainstream. So this is what I mean when I say rape became a business. This is what happens. A child reports a rape. The parents keep silent, and then they approach the perpetrator. The perpetrator promises, they now threaten the perpetrator that, look, I'm going to arrest you, I'm going to report you to so-and-so, and you're going to be dealt with. And you know what now happens? The perpetrator now begs and says, hey, don't do that. You know what? I can give you this. Let's settle this. And they do settle. When they settle, you will not believe that there's actually a negotiation going places. Do you know that as I speak, the current rate for rape that is negotiated is between 200 naira in some cases, that's shocking, to as much as 550,000 naira. In some cases, as much as 1.1 million has been given as a way to keep the people silent. So what now happens? The parents collect the money. And what they do next is they go rent new houses. He buys new shoes. He buys a bag. He even goes to rent a house or buy a plot of land. He does not remember that my daughter or my son has been abused and deserves justice. Now, that evidently is a total disregard for life. If at that level where humanity ought to be more sensitive, if at that level people cannot have respect for the life of their own child, imagine that multiplying mentality in the population of 60% of Nigerians who are living under poverty. That's a huge thing that we have on our hands. And then you now see it being, this same business model is perpetuated at police stations where you see police officers actually negotiate terms. They collect money from the parents seeking justice, they collect money from the perpetrators, they collect money from chiefs, they collect money from heads of communities, they collect money from everybody. They even collect money from government in some cases to quell a matter, especially when it's a high-profile person involved. Now, when we see all of this, at the heart of it, you begin to ask yourself that, what else could be a problem here? It is clear that parents don't know how to parent. They forgot how to be a child, or how it used to be a child when they were young. Now, this disconnect produces parents without conscious parenting, which enables the culture of silence. And children now have access to so much information, from the text to the videos, you name it, they have all of this access. Now, even when there's parental control requirements of these devices, you see that the sexualization of children is at an all-time high. Now, this strong desire in children these days, with this kind of exposure, you will begin to see a generation of young children who want to own their own money from very little. Now, because they want to own more money, they become more vulnerable and susceptible to somebody who will tell them, I will do this to you, which means I could rape you, sodomize you, defile you, and then in return for that, I'm going to give you money for it. Just recently, a young boy was paid 30,000 naira for him to be sodomized. He collected the money and he went on to buy a few things. Well, how did we get to know? He became so ill. By the time he was examined, we began to understand that, oh my gosh, something happened here. So that the 30,000 naira he was paid, he was just young. He's just a 12-year-old young boy. But he wanted money to go buy stuff that his parents could not afford. So this inability of children to say no and shout out is also part of the fact that we are not training young people to understand what adversity quotient is. Now, the capacity, what is very ironic and disturbing in this whole investigation is the fact that the capacity to bear pain, suffering, abuse, and the eroding of their self-esteem that leads to a misleading sense of fortitude is what is shocking in all of this. Imagine a situation where somebody will say, rather than I shout and call out a perpetrator, I will bear the pain so that later in life as I grow up, I will share my experience and say, I went through this hardship. The idea that resilience and adversity quotient is not about triumphing over evil, but is measured in how much evil a monster can inflict upon people on their human rights is the most shocking of this investigation so far. And I think this is at the heart of everything. And it is time we begin to look at the fundamental issues of how the lack of implementation, lack of consequences for bad behavior has enabled the continuous perpetration of the evil we see in our society, where the monster called human rights abuses has reared its fangs so much that it can cut deep into us and tear us all apart. Now, where we get to a point where human rights abuses is whisked away with religious favor rather than civic action and engagement, oh my, we're in deeper trouble, which means the conversation regarding investigation into child rights and human rights abuses must continue. We must continue to give voices to these things and begin to put all of these stories in a way that people will see them, understand them, and then we need to change how we use the media. The media is an agenda setter. They are the ones who create news that people pursue. They don't pursue people's news. They are the creators of this. And we should get to that point when I say creator in a positive sense, like, look, you go out there, see what the issues are, unearth them, and make them trend. Make them front face so that people will become shaking to the point where we begin to take actions as we're seeing it manifest with the process in Nigeria. It's all human rights abuse driven. But what more can we do? And that's why when my story inspired the Delta State government to pass the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, I was at my topmost joy. For me, that was journalism with impact. And I think going forward, I want to do much more because the lack of knowledge about the laws, how the laws are applied, the implementation of the laws, and unwillingness to fight off evil or ills done to people through civic action and engagement, the more we see it being rejected and it's considered too much of a task to take on, yet people are willing to suffer evil no matter the cost on them. It's clearly a psychological disconnect and a dysfunction. Vulnerable people who don't know their rights, who lack capacity to question and speak up, have no self-esteem. And they are being socialized by culture, very wrong patriarchal culture, very horrible, misleading narratives and stereotypes that are not true. Traditions and religious conditions, environment, and dysfunctional home, what values, misleading stereotypes, all of these things are only enabling increasing what I call the vulnerability indices and indexes of every one of us. And this is the time for us to admit that we've got a problem. And the moment we admit it, this is also the time for us to say, you know what, we can't keep the culture of silence anymore. In other words, when you see an evil happening, don't snap the picture. Take the next action, which is call a proper helpline, call a proper radio station, speak out to the point where you take civic action that is driven by civic engagement that requires you to also protect the life of another human being, whether you know them or not. So this has been why I have been doing why I did my story and how far it's come and the impact it's making, and we continue to make because I still have much more to do. And with my book, I have been able to capture the ideas of the roots of some of these things in a storytelling manner. And that's why I titled the book Distortion, because at the heart of everything we have the monster we see, the menace we see in our environment is because of distorted values, distorted laws, distorted principles, distorted belief systems, distorted culture, distorted traditions, distorted stereotypes, and so many other levels of distortion that have eaten so deep into our society that we have allowed pejorative and the subhuman of subhuman human to become the way of life, and it needs to stop.
And Ejiro, this is this is so fascinating. Thank you so much. And I want to hear a little more about your book in a few minutes. This is just absolutely astounding, some of the things that you're outlining here. And I especially really appreciate your discussion of the need and the challenges involved, right, in using data in your journalism. It's something that we in the School of Journalism here at the UW-Madison campus really try to impress upon our students how important it is to be able to draw upon those tools to tell these stories in a way that might change the way that they're viewed, but at the same time, keep that human element that you are so beautifully also discussing here. I want to ask both you and Fredrick a question, and I understand we have Fredrick also available through WhatsApp now. And the question that I had before we just turn things over to our attendees, because there are already some questions I think being posed in the chat here, is what were some of the challenges that both of you faced in the process of covering these vital stories specifically during COVID-19? How did the process of reporting these stories change and become more or less challenging for you? And either Fredrick or maybe we'll ask Fredrick first and then come back to Ejiro on that question. Is Fredrick there?
Hello?
Hello, Fredrick, we're glad you're back. Did you hear my question that I was asking?
Did not hear clearly. Repeat.
Sure, and I'm hoping that your connection will be okay. The question that I have actually for both of you today is, what challenges did you face covering your stories specifically during COVID-19? How did the pandemic challenge you in the process of covering these stories in your reporting process?
Okay, for now is our projects. So we work with different journalists in the different countries of the Nile Basin. So we faced several challenges working on this project. During the COVID lockdown, we did have reporters to work on this project. We sent out a call for application, and reporters would send in their applications, but they were postponing the work. We had some who took about 2 months before they went to the field because of the lockdown, and they were not able to go to leave places where they were to go to the field and report. So what they did was to report, from their homes. They called here and there, and they reported from their homes, which was a bit okay. But we thought we lacked voices, local voices, some stories, because reporters were not able to go to the field. And what we did, editors, was to tell them to wait a bit, So later, the project took time because we had to wait for the time when they were able to go to the field. Yes, this is one of the major problems that we faced. I'm not sure if my colleague wants to add.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, were you finished there? I don't want to cut you off. I just can't see you. Okay, so we might be having a little more audio trouble again, but I think that gives us a good sense of some of the issues for Fredrick, especially in terms of dealing with the rules around the lockdown and whether or not journalism in different contexts is seen as an essential kind of work. Ejiro, what would you say to that question? Oh no, we can't hear you again. We can see you now, but can't hear you.
What about now?
Yes,
Tell
yes.
me yes.
That's wonderful. Great.
Oh my God, Lindsay, good, finally. Oh.
I'm so glad.
Okay, so one, the most important challenge was, remember, I wanted to understand the root cause of the problem. I did not understand why it was so pervasive. And data was the key. I did not want to hear people's opinion, anecdotes. I've heard enough of that. And I told myself, look, if you're going to write this story and get to the heart of it, understand what the core problems are, you got to get it data. Getting data was the most difficult thing I had to go through. I mean, I was in some of the stories, I pursued a data. Do you know I had to dedicate as much as, on the average, on a daily basis, 6 to 7 hours pursuing a data. On the average, for 4 months. For 4 months, trying to get stories like, you need to give me data. And the fact that they hoard these public documents is shocking. You ask for simple data. We don't want the name of the incident of the victims. We don't need the names of the victims. Just let us see, how many reports are you getting? Which gender are affected, or sex are affected? Where are these? You know, because you need location. Okay, so that you know whether in this population of the location, and in this location, is the population more affected by it, by what number? Because if you can know the number, you can tell. And then by the time you're able to get all of this data, what now happens is you begin to now narrow down to what is now the story. And in getting what is now the story, you got to get the victims. And getting victims is a problem because nobody wants to talk. When you live in a society where stigmatization is the norm, you've got a problem. You've got to work on the people's psychology, in the sense that you also need to tap and help them tap into their own self-esteem so they can own those experiences and then say it. That is the goal. So I had to also navigate that. Getting victims to talk is not an easy task. It needs a special kind of training. People need to be trained on how to talk to victims. Next, speaking to institutions. Many of them do not care about you. The truth is, they don't even care about the victims. You need to accept it. It took me a lot to accept that. I could not accept it. What I just did was, I understood what their game was. For them, it was, you write the numbers, let's use it to get money, and then forget about the victim. You have remand homes. You ask them, where are the numbers of remand homes in Delta State, for example? And they don't want to give you data. You write letters and letters. I pursued the Ministry of Justice for almost 2 years plus, trying to get a data, and I have not gotten it till date. Oh yeah, I went through calls, through letters, through emails, to personal visits, straight in their offices. I still don't get it. That's because we live in a society where the government feels when you speak about these things, you're undermining them. They forget that it's not about that. So we as a media, we need to now begin to think, how do we help institutions understand that this is a collective work? That we're all working together to achieve one goal, which is what? Respect the life of a child, respect the life of a human being, and that we can fight for it. And we must protect them, and that perpetrators cannot be on the loose. And we cannot justify this level of menace, this level of monster. We cannot justify it. We can't. And then you now see a situation where you see parents who will tell you they want to talk about these things, and then they withdraw because there are threats from family. We see a situation where police officers will tell you to your face, madam, if you don't give me money, I need to give you information. In other words, you need to exchange money with me before I can give you info. We see a situation where you see the judges, female judges for that matter, who understand that this is a violation of a woman. And you know how women feel about this thing, because we live in a society that has socialized them that your only worth is in that thing between your leg. That makes you begin to feel that if that is gone, then you're worthless. You see a judge who understands this, and yet is insensitive to a victim, instead allows a perpetrator to go on the loose. So what we have here is a systemic problem. And in understanding this is why before you go out to write a story, you have to understand, in which environment am I writing on? What are the roadblocks I'm going to meet? The psychological roadblocks, the bureaucratic roadblocks. Imagine a Ministry of Children Affairs, and the only amount of money you dedicate per month is 60,000 naira only.
Wow.
Yeah.
60,000 naira only. If you break that down, that's like, I didn't even calculate it in dollars. But if you divide 60,000 by 380, 80 naira, okay, 60,000 divided by 380, that's the amount in dollars. When you configure that, you will see the details of that. So when you see a situation like this, you understand that before you go into that story, especially a story of this nature, there are factors you have to consider, that people will not talk to you. You're going to get lots of drop calls. You're going to get rejected in the face. And you must understand that it's not about you. Once you understand that it's about them protecting their interests, you now think of the many ways you need to navigate that terrain to get the story that must get out.
That's so important. And I appreciate you sharing that, especially because we do have I see from our list of attendees, some journalism students here and students who want to work in multiple contexts, not just here in Madison or in the United States. And you're describing such a challenging situation in which to talk about a story that is so important. I have several questions now coming from our attendees, and I'll start with Vivian Chimes' question. Thanks, Vivian, for putting this in the chat. And the question was for you, Lady E. What would you have to say about the regulations that inhibit the activities of broadcast media in Nigeria? And this writer says, because I feel it's not just about making people forget the reality, the Nigerian broadcast media is not as free to do deep journalism. What would you say to that?
Okay, I like the question Vivian asked. I see where she's coming from, but here's what I'm going to say. At the heart of why you think investigative journalism doesn't work is because those at the helms of affair, those who are the executive persons who have the responsibility to decide the creative context and the editorial direction that the media should go, are not professionals. That's on the one hand. Two, when you have investors who feel they should call the shots, who are just businessmen, not professionals of the media industry, you're going to have a roadblock. Three, we have an NBC who is pro-government at every given time. We understand how that works. But you know what I'm doing right now? Because I have the opportunity to be an executive head, it means I have total content control. And because I am an investigative-driven mindset, that's what I have. It's my mindset. So anything I'm creating, every of the staff I have trained, I personally took up their training. I then worked with Code for Africa and the World Bank to help them with their data journalism skill sets and tools they need to get it done. So I know that if I'm going to do an investigative journalistic work, I've got to have one, the right staff. Two, they need to have the right tools. Three, they need to have the right skills. Four, they need to get the regular, consistent training. If they don't have this, you're not going to succeed. And most importantly, they should be people who are passionate about investigative journalism, about fact-checking, about data, about telling these stories, about the community. Remember, it's about the community you live in. It's not just about music. Music is good. Like what I did for our entire program schedule is mind-blowing. I'm using the word mind-blowing because that's the feedback I get every single day. I took time, I understood the environment I'm in. I understood their mindset. I understood the culture. I understood the expectation. I did my market research. I went deep into the place. I didn't want something surface. So in certain cases, I went undercover more or less so that I can get the data I want, so that I can create the kind of content I want to drive, the kind of investigative journalism I want to drive. And that's exactly what I do today. And today we are known as the investigative-driven radio station, I dare say, even in Nigeria, alongside with Women Radio.
Thank you so much for that response, and also for that really important question. We have now a question in the Q&A box that's addressed to both Lady E and to Fredrick, who is with us on the line again. And this question's coming from Emily. So it's for both of you. Have the data that you have been gathering been preserved? Do you make it accessible to others from your fields and other fields?
Oh, yeah.
And so
Fredrick, I was expecting Fredrick to say something.
Fredrick, are you there?
I'm there, and I don't hear you well, but can you repeat the question?
Sure. So the question was, have you been able to preserve the data that you've been gathering, and have you been able to make it accessible to others from your field and other fields around the world?
Yes, probably this question I would not have come up if I finished my presentation. I'm sorry I'm taking challenges with the internet, but now what we do, when we gather, when we give out journalism grants to journalists to write the stories, and at the end, produce data visualizations, so they're able to publish this. Some some it is open online, others do publish in offline, and so it is open to the public. But again, when journalists complete their stories, they give them to us at Infonile, and we turn them into bigger projects. For example, I was telling you before my internet went off that we are currently mapping vulnerability to COVID-19 in the Nile Basin. So we are using this data to map the vulnerability in the Nile Basin, looking at indicators such as poverty levels, HIV/AIDS prevalence rate, elderly population, flood, access to water, and population density. We are looking at this, and we want to find out what does this mean to the audience, to the people who live there. If, for example, in counties where poverty levels are high, what does it translate to when it comes to COVID cases? Or maybe, for example, if you look at Uganda, where HIV/AIDS cases are high, what does it mean to COVID-19 cases? Does it mean that they are high or so? This is the stage now we are on. So yes, what we do when we get this data, for example, this data now we are visualizing it and mapping it. Then we make it open, accessible online, and everyone can check it out. If you went to our website, infonile.org, you will find several maps there. So this is open stuff. Yes.
Excellent, thank you. And that's a really important and an intricate way of sort of addressing that question of preservation and making this data available. And then Lady E, I think you had something to say about that too.
Oh yeah. So yeah, preserving data is everything. There's nothing as good as access to information when you needed it. Like what I did with Code for Africa is most of the archival data regarding statistics, information, and all of that, I got them from the Mugira Center, from the Center of Domestic Violence Sexual Response Team. I got all of that data, some other data too from Delta State as well, from FIDA, Women Lawyers Association. And I was able to give it to Code for Africa, and they have archived it for me in a system where anybody can go and get it. So another way I also let people know that this exists is I do something that sometimes I think may be offensive to some people, but I now realize that knowledge is power when it's put to good use. It's my philosophy. It's a motto I run with. Knowledge is power when it's put to good use. What do I mean? I used to think that it is proper when you write a story to let it be discovered. I now understood the error of that. The day I understood the importance of amplification, what I started doing was I began to share all my stories, because the work I put into that, no, it's a lot of work. Why would I put in so much work and then I wait for it to be discovered? Oh no, it's not going to be there. So what I do is on all the platforms I am, even the ones I don't want to be giving up, even the ones they add me without my asking. On those platforms, I share every single story, every single data I have. I make it public. I reference people. I have the group where I train over 109 students across 10 universities in Nigeria. I share stuff with them. We do our weekly trainings, although we, and all of that. I mentor them personally so that the information I have, I don't hoard them. There's no point hoarding information. Give it out, because sometimes, you know what I discovered? Sometimes even the World Bank doesn't have everything. Neither does UNESCO. Nah, they don't. When you want to get to the core of an issue, you got to be something that is done by people who are in that area and who have unearthed that information. And that is priceless.
Well, thank you so much for that response. I do need to say really quickly, just in my capacity as the moderator, that we're coming to the official end of the hour that is designated for the Africa at Noon series. And we know that some of you have to come and be here for the hour and then have to leave. So just for those of you who do have to go ahead and log out, that's fine. And we sort of open the space for you to do that. But we'll continue for those of you who want to keep on talking. We'll stay for just a little bit longer if our panelists can do that.
Good.
Because we do have a few more questions. And so one question in the Q&A box that is here, it's coming from Joseph States, and it looks like it's addressed to you both, is do you consider yourselves more journalists who advocate for issues or activists who use journalistic skills? That is a good question.
Good question.
Who'd like to take it first?
I like Fredrick to go.
Fredrick, what do you say?
You said, do you consider ourselves what? Journalists or what?
Do you consider yourself to be more of a journalist who is an advocate or more of an activist who uses journalistic skills?
Yes, certainly. Having had 15 years of experience, I mostly look at myself as someone in journalism advocate for water access in my cities, conservation of water resources. So I kind of look at it as an advocate for water access and conservation of water resources, biodiversity in the Nile Basin. Yes, it is true. We do several things. Sometimes we write stories, but at the end of the day, you as a journalist, what do you want your community to do? What are you advocating for? What do you hope to achieve? Because when we report these stories, we don't only aim at the testing stories and probably getting paid, but we aim at something that we want to see in our communities. And so sometimes I look at myself as the person who is advocating for that good stuff. The stuff that I see is legitimate. Yes, that's true. So we work with civil journalists, and we have trained them to look at this as something that they would give to their communities. Especially now when as we focus more onto solution journalism, by giving communities, like projects that are working to make sure that we copy and do these things. Certainly, I think I would consider myself as someone advocating for something.
Wonderful. Thanks for answering that tough question. And that's you're giving us a lot to think about here. What would you say, Ejiro?
Lindsay, I would say this. Every passionate journalist inside you is a nugget of advocacy and activism. You cannot be a passionate journalist and fire, that ember doesn't burn. Because at the heart of media is advocating for a correction of wrong, so something better. To be activist means that you now have what is called civic engagement. And every human being should be civic driven. We all should. Because the reason why some people are not civic driven, that's why you have more bad things happen. Because people don't understand that it's not just being a civic duty. It is a requirement for survival. And Fredrick said something that I love. He talked about solutions journalism. When I started doing my story, I did not know there was a term called solutions journalism per se. But what I did with my story was I proffer solutions to the problem, because I understood that if we don't proffer solutions and just write about the problem, the job is not complete. And in telling my story, that was because I told myself from the get-go, you have to write it in a manner where people read this. They go away with knowledge that is powerful, and then they put that knowledge to good use. And for them to put it to good use, they need to be empowered with information, the right information that will guide them properly to the end goal that they want. And that was why I took time to break down the end-to-end process of, should you be in a situation like this? These are the steps you got to take. You can't miss any of this. Don't tell me you're ignorant. Now, if you meet a roadblock, this is the next step to take. If that's not coming through for you, reverse like this and take this next one. In other words, there are multiple ways to have a solution. And then I gave instances where people were succeeding at doing something differently. Like a girl who was in Calabar at the time of the lockdown, at the peak of the lockdown, when this girl couldn't be taken away from the home where she was being molested by her sister's husband. The NGO got into action. What did they do? They began to teach the girl skills on how to speak to the perpetrator, call him out, shame him. The moment they give the 16-year-old that kind of tool, that kind of confidence, the man never got to her until she left the place. So I use the story like that to show that this is possible, because people often have this shut down. It's not possible, it's not doable. I don't have experience, I don't have examples to fall back on. I'm saying you don't have an excuse here. You can't read the story and say you have an excuse. So yes, solutions journalism is a good way to incorporate into what you do. But most importantly, you have to ask yourself, which is the best format to tell the story I want to tell to get impact? Because at the end of the day, journalism is about making impact. It's not just to write the stories and win an award for writing a story. That is good, which is fine. It's fine. Because sometimes you can win an award for a story, but it doesn't have an impact in some cases. I have seen that happen because the story is just good. But at the end, it didn't have the impact you want. So while we strive to write stories that actually give off awards, which is brilliant, let that not just be the sole aim. Let it be that we want to make a change. And to be a change agent, you've got to be passionate. So it's non-negotiable.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's so inspiring to hear, and I'm so glad that some of our students are from the journalism school are on this and listening right now to hear both of these important perspectives. And I actually see a question from one of my own students, Sunmi, who is asking, I think this is addressed to you, Lady E. And she asks, in June in Nigeria, we saw an online movement called #StopRapingWomen, where Nigerians, specifically young women, were speaking out against rape and telling the stories of people like Tina, Farashina, and many more. So to what extent did this movement have any impact in the real world outside of social media spaces from your perspective?
Oh, that's a very good question. It did have an impact. It did have an impact. Like, for example, the federal government had to declare a state of emergency on rape. They had to declare a state of emergency. A bill has been passed now regarding anti-sexual harassment bill, and they are working towards making it passed. So there's that bill, and it has got to the level where, they've moved on. There's an act to that effect. And then in my state, for example, we have what is called the VAP Act, the Violence Against Persons Act. It was sitting in the state of assembly. Nobody wanted to pass the VAP. But when I publicly called them out on very public fora, I didn't keep short. I kept saying, when you asked that question earlier, do you share data? That's what I did. I just kept sharing data. The thing was so much that people couldn't contain the raw figures. And the government people were there. The shame of it, knowing that they knew this, but were trying not to talk about or do something about it. A few days later, they passed the VAP Act. So it did garner the kind of response we want. The Sex for Mark grade story that came out with regard to Kiki Modi when she did all of that bit, that was awesome. That added to it. So on many, many layers, so many of us journalists, documentary journalists, print journalists, broadcast journalists. The interesting thing is I actually do both broadcast as well as print. So I run the two at the same time. But all of us in our own little way, those young people you saw who spoke, the fact that they have voices, that's a big deal. There was no voices earlier before now. People didn't have voices, but the social media gave them voices. And they have come to know that in this generation where they are, these young persons are knowing that for them to get the kind of response they want from government, the social media is their voice to bring out an issue and shame government to taking action.
That's such an interesting point, and it's refreshing to hear, you know, this sort of way of thinking about social media as a tool that helps to give a voice, right? And is something that's at the same time so deeply situated within its the kind of social environments, right? That we use it. It's a tool, and definitely a tool, I think, for younger voices in a way that maybe we haven't seen before. So thanks to Taiwo Sunmi for that question. I want to see now, are there any questions left from anyone who's still here with us? Let me see if I've missed anything. Any more questions for either of our two panelists? I think that's all I can see here. Just want to make sure. So if not, I think what we'll do is say thank you to both Fredrick and Lady E for joining us today, especially given the technological difficulties that both of you experienced at different points. Just thank you for your patience with us. And we're so glad that you were able to be part of this conversation, even when we couldn't bring you here to Madison, which is what we
I look forward to coming to Madison and giving out some of my books as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope to see both of you here sometime, and we can learn even more from you. So thanks to you both. Fredrick, are you still there? Just wanted to hear your voice one more time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those who are wondering, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. We have still a lot of stuff that we are doing at the missionary.org. You guys can always check on our site to find out what we are doing. I hope we can, probably explore more of what we are doing on email or any other platform. Yeah, thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are asking, Lady E's book is called Distortions. And I believe she was holding a copy of it when we had her on video here, which is such a great idea. I'm going to have to remember that. And just such an amazing, I've read some of the interviews with you about the book, and just really recommend people check it out. And it looks like Diane has posted a link to it here in our chat. So be sure to check that out. Thanks to all of you for being here today. And we'll go ahead and sign off, and the Africa at Noon series will continue next semester, as Aaliyah stated. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks. Appreciate you.